What I thought I'd do, because I haven't been here in a while, is just recheck the measurements to see how they are. Because when we were setting them, I didn't think that those are the same. Yeah, I think that this one and this one may be a little different. I was making drawings in here on the weekend. No, they're the same. And I noticed in making drawings that a couple of them, that's 4. That's 4. These are right. That's 3. I thought I noticed that a few of them weren't exactly as I recall, but this should be 6. Yeah, this is 6.5, almost 7. This is 7. They're exactly the same. 7. These are all right. These are the same.
Well, it'd be pretty hard for these to move.
No, it's just my recollection of what they were and what they actually are is different.
So there's something magical, Richard. Here are these cubes that weigh over 30 tons each, and yet the
35.
way they 35 tons, and yet they look almost weightless, right? They look like they're floating because of the way the forging takes place.
That's because you can practically, if you get up, if you stand, you're a little taller than I am, you can actually see right through. Right?
Yeah, incredible, right?
Yeah.
So there's this kind of tension between the lightness of appearance and the utter heaviness of their presence.
Well, there is some sort of feeling that they settled from somewhere else, that one came down and just happened to balance itself on the other. And that gives it an additional weightlessness. Some of them, like, you feel the pressure going down. Others, you really feel like the top is going to float.
So did you know when you made each of these cubes, which one would go with which piece? Or did you make 8 separate cubes and then mix and match to get the effect you were looking for?
As the cubes were being made, I knew the measurements of each cube.
Right.
So I told Alexander, who I work with in Germany, to match as close as he could the pairs, even though each is only off by a few 5 or 6 centimeters. But I told him to match as clearly and as close as possible as he could. When we brought these last 2 in, I didn't want to put that one on top of this one because it was about 3 or 4 centimeters larger. And I wanted it to be very, very clear that these 2 blocks were lined up on their edges. So we had to switch these 2 blocks.
So there's something here, you can almost see this like circular pattern. Is that coming from?
Where they cut off the nipple.
Aha, that's the sawing off
of the nipple. Which is different than this striation, which is just a hammering striation.
Right. And that is just the pressure
The
of
pressure
that
of the
press.
hammer. You can actually see the pressure coming in. Right? You can see the press here.
And then this incredible.
See, this is still a mill scale.
So that's the mill scale, and that's what it ultimately comes.
That's what it all.
And yet somehow the play of that mill scale with the steel is so ravishingly beautiful.
I tend not to go there, but I'll accept it.
I know it's not something you're comfortable
See,
talking about.
here they hit it so hard that it actually turned into stone, right?
Yeah.
This is dung a little. Right. But that doesn't bother me either.
But I think what's so amazing is each face of these is totally different. So you've got this very beautiful play of the materiality and then just the solidness of it.
Well, it's not a term I usually use, but these pieces, particularly this set, ends up being very, very sensual.
Yeah.
And they do look primordial. They do look like they've come, or they could have come from a different century.
So on this block, I see what look like almost perfect horizontal lines, Richard.
Yeah.
What's that the result of?
Hammering.
Again, it's just the way it was hammered.
The way it was hammered. Different hammerings. Probably they got to this point and it was cooling down and they wanted to hammer it once more to get it flat.
You talked
earlier. See, they could have, after they hammered this one, flamed it. If they flamed it, they would have taken all the mill scale off and it would have looked more like that. But we made a decision because we had some of them where there was a lot of still remaining mill scale on to try to keep the tight surface of the mill scale because I prefer the gray, actually.
And that mill scale is just the carbon leaching out?
The carbon leaching out of the heating process. Carbon and probably a little magnesium. Which really gives the steel its strength is the copper. And the thing about this, there's 16 different elements in these on the valence chart. Right. So they're really made of a big mix.
And is the mix always the same?
The mix, I want a cubic mix so that they take a sample after they pour, to see what the mix is, and they analyze it.
Uh-huh. And how long does it take them to heat this up? In other words, from the moment you get started.
There are about 6 or 7 ovens.
Wow.
And they put big blocks into the ovens, and sometimes it takes a day.
Just to get it to the right temperature.
Yeah.
So, Richard, one of the things that I want to just ask you to talk a little bit about is what happens as you come into this space, and now we're in the center of these 4 columns, and we've moved around the blocks. There is something magical that occurs when you finally get inside.
I think there's the magnetic field of all of them. You feel coming in from every direction. So you become an internalized vector to the placement of these pieces, and they center you. If people walk toward the middle, they don't walk toward the middle, they walk exactly to the center. And I think for some people, they resist walking to the center. Now, I have no idea why that occurred. I would have thought most people would have come to the center. But as I've observed coming here on Saturdays and whenever in large groups of people, people resist coming to the center. Now, I don't know exactly why that occurs or psychologically what the reason is, but maybe they feel a certain stasis of the gravity of the load where they feel apprehensive. I don't know.
They're so visceral, these blocks, right? You can't help, because they're essentially 6 feet tall, you relate to them physically, and then they become monumental when there's one on top of the other. But as you move into the center, your body is hyper aware of what's around you.
Of what's behind you, what's in front of you, what's to the left and what's to the right. You're pinpointed.
In a way, the arbitrariness of where those 4 posts were creates almost exactly the perfect space.
Well, they're just off square.
Right.
And the piece is squared in on the square, so.
So you mentioned also that you come in often to draw.
Yeah,
So
every Sunday.
What are you drawing?
I'm drawing the relation of the edges to the blocks. I'm drawing the specificities of what I can't retain from looking at them. I'm drawing to re-see into them. I never draw before I make a sculpture. I don't make a model and draw from the model. I always make notations for myself after. So I'm drawing the measurement of the pieces after. I spent a day here just drawing this block on top of the other block. Now, are the drawings that I'll ever show? No. They're purely for notations for myself to understand what I'm seeing.
So before...
And they're to remind me of how the weights differentiate, how some are pushing down, how some are lifting up. And in the drawings I've made, if you look at the drawings, you can see that some look as if, and even though they're measured quite accurately, that some are top-heavy, with the weight really compressing the ones below. Some seem to lift up and take off and are weightless. And I make the drawings for my own internal understanding of the differentiations in weights.
And have you discovered surprises when you've been looking at them this carefully that you didn't anticipate seeing?
I think seeing's a way of thinking, and if you keep looking and keep thinking about what you're looking at, you find that you initially had reduced something to something quite general. And when you look at the specificities of what you're looking at and try to draw it as a tool to understanding what you're seeing, you see much more than you could have seen or known. So I really draw for information. I think what I'll do now is I'm going to show the camera a few photos of just exactly what happens. This is a block that's coming out of the oven, and it's coming out of the ingot. And so you get an idea initially what a hot block coming out of an ingot of a specific weight looks like. Then the block is picked up with a gigantic crane, which has a hook which has a reverse clamp on it. So as it lifts up, the clamp tightens in. Now the blocks have a nipple on the end, and that nipple allows the chain hoist to turn the blocks once they're within the structure of the hammer or the forge. The forge is about 40 to 60 feet high. Here's the block in the forge. Now, when they start hammering this block, you think, how are they going to get this to a 6-sided cube? What they do is they go from a 16-sided element by hammering on the opposite ends to getting it to something that looks comparatively round. Here's another shot, pulling a little further back. Here's a shot a little beforehand showing the whole block being hoisted into the hydraulic hammer. This will give you an idea of the height of the hydraulic hammer. This will give you an idea of how they watch the edges while they're forging to see if they can keep them flat into the specifications that I want. And finally, this is the nipple that they have to burn off at the end, and then they have to go back and reheat that surface and forge that surface. I have a plan here of this positioning of these blocks in this gallery, which will give you the dimensions. I think if the space has to be reduced to 50 feet, it'll just be 5 feet less all the way around. Rather than 16 feet here, it'll be 11.5 feet. They're 20 feet on center. I have a list of forged pieces that I've made over the years, but I don't know if we have to go through that all. There's about 40 to 50 forged pieces. I think I have about 45 of them here. So now I think, Ian, we could probably open it up to questions.